Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning again to those of us who have already been on committee meetings this morning. And here we are with our, I believe this is our first committee meeting day virtually. We didn't have one last month. So first of all, calling the meeting to order, and then let's go ahead with item 2, the roll call.
Good morning, Ms. Landing.
Here.
Ms. Landing is here. Ms. Hyatt.
Here.
Ms. Hyatt is here. Mr. O'Rourke.
Here.
Mr. O'Rourke is here. Mr. Crosby. Okay, I don't believe Mr. Crosby is with us this morning.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. So our first item of business under the things to vote on would be number 3, approval of the minutes from the March 2nd, 2020 meeting. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. That minutes are approved. Next item is public comments. And Christine, I looked, did we have any public comments in regard to this topic?
Okay. We had one public comment from Mr. Michael Laurie, and it was fairly lengthy, so I will just include that in the minutes if that's okay with you. Okay,
and I did actually read that one, so okay, thank you. I didn't know if there was a special place. All right, and then, oh, and I also had one public comment that came in, which I'll share in our next topic. So, but it was from some of the golf course managers. So, okay. So then number 5 is the fiscal year 2021 budget update, review, and proposal. And Mr. Demora, is Ms. Kotab going to handle this for us, or are you?
I think that was the finance agenda.
That was finance committee.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. How embarrassing. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is number 5, we're going to discuss facilitating local businesses to reopen safely. And I just want to preface this by saying to anyone who is out there listening, this is not about the town trying to necessarily interject ourselves into your business. This is trying to thread the needle between getting things open as quickly as possible so people can get back to work and make their livelihood and feed their families, and making sure that that we all are clear on the things that are important to keep in mind. And so I'm going to actually start off, if I can, with one of the comments that I did hear, which was in regard to golf courses. So as most of us are aware, golf courses have been able to stay open because they were outdoors and they could pretty easily not share equipment. They've been not allowing 2 people in a cart. A lot of people have been walking, but it's a good form of exercise and getting out of doors. And now that things are starting to open, there are questions about things like eating. You can eat outdoors, but how does that affect other aspects? So, so the main comment that came from that, and I have a couple of questions too, was the thought that everything needs to be as clear as possible. The more open-ended we leave things, the harder it is, which I sometimes think means it's easier if we talk about what can't be done or what shouldn't be done rather than what can be, and hope that list is very, very limited. So I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts on this topic.
Tom, have anything?
Well, Kathy, if I can,
Yes,
my thought is similar to what you just said. I believe that framing it in the terms of what you cannot do is much better, because it's easier to understand, because there's going to be more questions. The other thing that I believe that we actually are trying to interject in business to see what we can do to try to spur this thing along and to get us get the businesses back open as fast as we can, and help those business owners as well as us citizens, get back to a normal thing. One of the things, and this is just personal, and I don't know if I should say this, but I get frustrated sometimes where facts and data get eliminated from this discussion. Mm-hmm. And by facts and data, I mean, there is no question that this is a monster, this thing. But sometimes I'm not so sure that the fear that we all have right now, or are led to believe that we have, we should have right now, based on the data and the facts. And the interesting thing that I see coming out now is just the fact that so many of these casualties are people that are elderly, are vulnerable, have had COPD, have been smoking for 20 or 30 years, that come to the game with respiratory problems. So when people say COVID-19 killed you, yes, it was one of the factors, but I happen to know not many, that's not true, 6 people that had it, and all are like in their 30s, all got sick, and they were sick, and then they all got better. And so I lean on the side of us trying to do every single thing we possibly can to get us back to where we were.
Well, thank you for that commentary. I'd like to add or clarify something. When I said not to interject in businesses, I just meant anytime you start talking about what is the town going to talk about in regard to what we should be doing, the moment you use certain terminologies, a good example would be guidelines, it starts sounding like we're telling people what to do. So I think that's what I wanted to avoid. We don't need our guidelines, because it's really what we want to hear is what do the businesses themselves think, and then how can we facilitate. I would like to make a comment on your point about data. I don't know if everybody in the town has been watching the DHEC numbers as closely as we have needed to do. I know I look at them every single day after the update, and it is interesting and very helpful, very positive sign to note that Mount Pleasant officially, as of yesterday's update, has had 110 confirmed cases total in our community. And that number has stayed constant for a couple of days. And in fact, it's actually gone up very, very little over the last week, which looks like we have either plateaued or we may be going down now in terms of anything new. And at the same time, we have 90,000 residents. As a percentage of our residents affected, it is something along the lines of 0.12. It's a very, very low number. And in fact, the numbers on IOP and Sullivan's, just for information, are 8 and 7 respectively. And their numbers are 0.18% and 0.19, I think. So I agree with your comment about fear being one of the big factors that has affected everything. And as we start to see our businesses really get open, especially now where restaurants are going to be able to start serving again, outdoors at first, and then hopefully indoors before too long. I hope that people will pay attention to the data. It is extremely important to keep our folks at risk safe, but I think we all pretty much know how to do that. We don't need to hear that from me or Tom or anybody else on council at this point. They've heard it, over and over. But we do need to get people back to work and have people be able to go on with their lives. So to give an example of clarity versus confusion, one of the comments that was made, and I'm reading off of this, so it says, for instance, with outside dining beginning on Monday, it doesn't, you're allowed to have up to 8 people at a table. And this is coming down from the governor, isn't it, Mr. Demora?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So allowed to have 8 people at a table, but doesn't say that they have to be family members. And so this particular thing, which was a golf club that does serve outside, said that they're assuming they do not have to be family members. And so they're saying, do we take the leap and assume that 2 non-family members can now ride in a cart together? Because if you're sitting next to someone at a table, you're not 6 feet apart. And so if you can do that, can you also ride in a golf cart? Because again, we've had this whole thing about not using shared space. And then the other, let me just find this other one. Couple of different questions. Oh, I know. So you can put tables apart, but you can't have people sitting at a table apart. So how does that come down? Do we need, I mean, it sounds so micromanaging, and that's what drives me crazy about it. But it does need to be clear. What are they supposed to do? Just kind of go with what makes sense to them? What do we all think about that?
I'm sorry. I think it's not it's not a business of the town of Mount Pleasant to be going into restaurants with a tape measure, in my opinion.
Right.
And I don't think that was ever intended, or anybody that ever thought that we would do that.
So they're saying, do we take the leap and assume that two non-family members can now ride in the car together?
Yikes.
Is now joining.
I think we pretty much leave it up to the establishments, leave it up to the golf courses, leave it up to everybody to manage it the way they see fit. And the best enforcement is by those that don't want to be infected. Don't play golf. Don't go to that restaurant. Stay home if you think you're in a vulnerable position. But I hope that we, the town of Mount Pleasant, don't get too involved in any of this enforcement, quite frankly. Our police department's busy. They have a good bit to do. And I think we should just leave it to what the interpretation of the governor's orders are. And I'll tell you what else it'll do. It'll protect us. Because I believe, honestly, I think there's going to be a discussion in about 8 months by business owners that want to say to people that shut them down and put them out of business, what basis did you have to do this?
Right.
And then there's going to be action, I believe. And we need to be protecting the town to make sure we don't become some type of enforcement division when it's not really our responsibility to do that with governor's orders, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Go
ahead, Laura.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, if we're not mandating anything, I guess the best way we're helping business is by not doing so. But also, what can we actually do to help or get the word out or make the public feel comfortable about getting back out? I know I was riding on Coleman Boulevard, and there's a business there that has a big sign that says, you can't enter without a mask. So I guess each business somehow needs to get the word out about what they're going to be doing and what'll make the public feel comfortable about getting out. So I don't know how we can be any help with that, with, getting the ball rolling if we're not mandating anything. I don't know what else we can do but encourage people.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things I'm going to ask Mr. DeMora about in just a second, but I thought we should have this open discussion first. I'd like to share an addition on what both Mr. Orrick and Ms. Hyatt said, and that is we already know there's businesses. A good example is Costco made the announcement that they were going to require masks, and I believe that started today, but it might have been over the weekend. And so everyone entering has to have a mask on. That's their right as a business.
Right.
And you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to shop at Costco. Costco doesn't have to have your business right now, and vice versa. If you really want to have a mask, that might be something that you feel makes you more comfortable. So I think you're absolutely right. And that's the reason for this discussion today, is so that businesses know that we stand ready to help out if necessary. But otherwise, I think the best step is let them run their business, let them get back to work. And as we hear more from the governor on opening up, for instance, restaurants and bars and so forth more, perhaps when they get to that point of indoor dining, same thing. If they need our help, if there's anything that business owners want to know, great. But we need our people to get back to work. At this point, people are hurting and they need to be able to pay their bills. Mr. DeMora, I have a couple of things here. So one is some issues that you had brought up to me about regulatory relief for businesses. So can you share a couple thoughts about, for instance, on the outside dining that you had some ideas on?
Well, thank you very much. And, we saw the order today that talked about restaurants. And by the way, we plan to do sort of exactly what the governor did in his order, and that was refer to the outdoor seating guidelines by the Restaurant and Lodging Association. It seems to lay out the information pretty clearly. And I think that's a good piece of information that we can provide to any restaurant that has questions about that. But in addition to that, we're talking about outdoor dining. So it naturally raises the question if there is something at the town level that we can do temporarily, and if council were willing, to allow businesses to add or expand their outdoor activity. And we think we can do that. A restaurant may need the ability to expand, say, into their parking lot, something we wouldn't normally allow to have happen. But if they can't have people indoors, what can we do to help them have people outdoors in a safe way that's not only safe for them and their workers, but that may also give confidence to members of the public about going there, knowing that they have expanded area outside to be able to dine. So we have some things that we can do to facilitate that. Obviously, some things wouldn't work. You can't expand your seating into a fire lane and handicap spaces and things that are common sense. But we think from a temporary, in a temporary way, that we can reduce some of our restrictions to help.
Okay. Now, is that something that would need to be a motion from this body or something in our council meeting next week?
Well, if in general this concept was something that you'd like to support, we can further develop it and have it ready for a council meeting. And by the way, what I didn't mention, and I should have, is I'm speaking of things not just applying to restaurants, but also allowing retailers to display merchandise, to sell merchandise outside in a parking lot area or a grass area. That's part of their business.
Okay. So, a week or two, things are happening very quickly. A week or two from now, we could be in a different place altogether with things, hopefully in a better place. So I guess the question would be, if staff is going to prepare that for us, are we going to need to call a special council meeting this week to get that allowance made?
You could. We had heard about the governor's desire to possibly do what you saw with restaurants, and it came out rather quick for us. So it's either we have a special meeting, or I guess it would have to wait until the next council meeting, which would be, in 8 days. So if you were willing, we could have something ready for you to consider a temporary ordinance. We could have that ready in a day or two.
Okay, and then we would just have to give the 24 hours notice to the public and so forth. So
it's preferable, yes.
Okay, great. Couple other things that you had mentioned were things like perhaps since business licenses are due July 31st, that we might be able to. Do you want to address that for us? What you had in mind there?
I'd be happy to. You all know of other taxes that have been deferred as far as their payment of when it is due. We can do the same thing with our business license. It's normally due July 31st. We could delay it, give an extra 30 days to the business to August 31st. And we could do that quite easily in the documents that actually we're preparing to send out as part of the normal renewal for the business license anyway. So if that was something you found palatable, we could easily extend out the due date 30 days. Just give a little extra time.
Once again, that would be part of this same information y'all would prepare and then council would discuss?
Yes.
And vote on?
Yes.
Okay. And then another thing was about impact fees, the possibility that deferring payment of impact fees, usually they're due at when the business permit is issued. And so you're saying the building permit, excuse me. So you're saying that perhaps we could have those deferred for up to 3 months?
Well, I think you heard that from Councilman Rambo at Finance too, right. That, there's impact fees that are due. It wasn't that long ago they were due at CO, Certificate of Occupancy. We moved it to the issuance of the building permit, but maybe you'd find that there's some way to provide a couple extra months relief before that bill is due. And that's preferable, because that way, if the owner doesn't pay the fees, we can always withhold the CO at the end.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on any of that? Oh, go ahead, Mr. O'Rourke.
I love all these ideas. I think anything that we can do to help the businesses get back, not only just open their doors, but get their financial situation in better hands for them to be able to stay open. There's some that are closing. There's some that are really close to closing. So I love the discussion. I'm glad that we do it. The one thing you mentioned, Kathy, that I agree with is this changes every day. It really does. Okay, it's Monday now. Maybe next Tuesday is too late. It's certainly not too late for the impact fees and some things like that. But the restaurateurs, that might be a little late for them. If we can give them some relief as far as getting into parking lots and some things like that, I think that would be good. But I think the things that are urgent, I think we should do right now. If not, I think we should wait until the council meeting time, only for this reason. You know, the public, it's important that the public knows every single thing that we do. When we keep having the individual meetings, sometimes we get some people, sometimes we don't, but it's that second Tuesday of every month that's kind of on everybody's radar. And I think if we can have the long meeting on Tuesday for the things that don't have to be, that would be good. But I think anything to help the restaurants as fast as we possibly can would be good. That's my only comment. And I love this discussion, and I'm so glad that we as a committee are talking about this, because it's real. It's really important to the people out there. So thank you.
Ms. Hyatt?
We have a sunset clause on the bags and signs and things we passed. Is it a consideration to extend that, or are we just going to take it till that date and then consider after, or should we talk about that at the same time?
That's an excellent point, Ms. Hyatt.
Yeah.
The idea would be we would package them all together, go back through them, make sure they had similar dates, and get it ready for you to consider.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So from the sounds of
Kathy.
things, yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Hey, this is Rick Crosby. I'm sorry, I'm audio only. I couldn't pick up the video portion, and I've been on the call. May I make a comment or two?
Please do. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Agree with everything that you folks have said thus far. I just wanted to give you an update as to something that's happening at Waterworks that may be of interest and perhaps benefit to our residents as well. We've been selected from MUSC to be part of a trial with several other businesses in the Lowcountry area. And what happens, as I understand this, is they're going to send in a group to Waterworks this week, and they'll do some testing of our employees, and they'll do an analysis of our employees to check really health conditions, medical histories, et cetera, et cetera. And what they plan to do is have a playbook to us by the beginning of next week. And it'll tell us really best practices of what we need to be doing in terms of dealing with the virus as it relates to our business. And the reason I mention that is that we've kind of talked about the regulatory and the governmental piece of reopening, but I can check and we can find out who the contact is at the MedU. But if local businesses had questions relative to the health piece and a best practice as to how they might want to restart, perhaps there is a resource at the MedU that might be of benefit to them and would offer assistance.
Okay, that's great input. Mr. DeMore, do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
I do not. That's great news. The playbook piece that Mr. Crosby mentioned is something I'd really like to see. I find that very interesting. We've been going through our own testing. First responders were able to receive tests at the beginning of last week. Other government workers now. But I'd be open and may reach out to MUSC to see if there's some way we could be a part of that and receive such a playbook.
Okay.
Yeah, Clay had just, he was finishing up a call this morning, which was a little bit of my delay because I had to get a download from him before I jumped on this call. But, for instance, procedures with respect to two guys riding in the truck, with our guys being in the field, how they can interface together. You may just want to reach out to Clay and or the MedU because as soon as we get that playbook, I think there'd probably be a great deal of carryover for the town as well.
That's great.
Okay, great. Thank you for that input.
Rick, can I ask one question? Is the Waterworks paying for that?
That's a great question, Tom, and I did not ask that. I don't believe that we are. I think we were invited to be part of the group because MUSC reached out to us. We did not reach out to them. So I'm relatively certain, but I will verify that we.
No, you don't need to verify it. I was just curious if you knew. No biggie. Thank you, though.
Sure.
Ms. Hyde, didn't you have something?
Oh, I was just going to say, if there's going to be an actual list of best practices, is there a way for the town to publish it, and then maybe businesses could easily just have a sign? We're following the MUSC guide, recommendations, or a simple sign rather than listing a mask, this distance, for people to feel comfortable. Like they can go to one place, and then maybe a business can have a sign out to say, let everybody know, and then they can reference just to make themselves feel comfortable if they realize what a business is up to without having to ask, okay, what specifically are you doing so that I feel comfortable to come there? I just didn't know if there was any way, if there's actually going to be a document, if we could just publish it so that we could be sharing it with the public as well as businesses in an easy, one place to find it all.
Mr.
Kathy,
DeMora,
if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say, I think the beauty of this trial is the fact that there is diversity with respect to the businesses.
Right.
And obviously, the protocol for waterworks in the town is vastly different from that of a restaurant or retail. So I think by virtue of having the cross-section of businesses that are involved in the trial, then a retail company may be able to grab the playbook with respect to the retail sector and obviously gather benefit from that.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So one other area then, I think we've kind of touched around this subject, is the one that is going back to being specific versus vague and the confusion that causes. The example was given in the email from golf management companies here in town, not golf management, but the managers of some of the courses, is there anything that tells them specifically they can't have, for instance, 2 people riding in a cart? Or is that just something people kind of figured because of the not using shared equipment in the beginning, social distancing 6 feet? At what point do they start to say, okay, we're going to do what makes sense for our business? Is that now, or does anybody want to comment on that? Or Mr. DeMora, do you know specifics?
I do. Those regulations were part of a plan by the golf courses to try to put into action the recommendations by the governor. And so as those start to change or open up, I think it's perfectly reasonable that theirs would open up as well.
Okay. Yep. Mr. O'Rourke?
I'll just make an O'Rourke comment as well. But if you notice, it sells more carts as well. Now you got 4 carts on a hole instead of 2. Whatever.
Unless everybody decides to walk, which is good exercise. But.
That is true. That is true.
Kidding. Everybody needs to do what they want to do on that. So, all right. So is there anything else for the good of the town that we need to discuss today? I think the number one things that have come out of this are, one, that it sounds like we need to act fairly quickly for the sake of our retail businesses and restaurants if we're going to allow them to expand their outdoor venue via their parking lot and other areas. Is that correct, Mr. DeMora?
Yes.
All right. So, so much as I know people don't like to have a lot of extra meetings, it sounds like we would need to have one, because a week from now, it could be a moot point. So if we could work on that. And then as far as the other, I agree, things like the business license permit fees and impact fees, that's something we can put into next Tuesday's council meeting if everyone agrees with that. I see heads nodding, so that sounds okay. This doesn't need to be any kind of motion, does it, Mr. DeMora?
No, the only thing is procedurally, we would need, the mayor obviously has the authority to call a special council meeting, or 3 council members. So at some point, we would need that action to go ahead and establish the meeting.
Well, I think maybe we might want to do that today, because we do want our businesses to have as much ability to run their business this week as possible. So do we hear a motion about this?
I would like to make a motion that you contact the mayor to ask for permission to call a special meeting. Is that the way you do it?
No, I think we can do it as members. 3 members of a committee can do it. So we can actually do it today.
I would like to make a motion that we have this meeting as soon as possible to assist the restaurateurs in expanding their business opportunities as much as possible.
I second.
Can we change the wording just a little?
Of course.
From what I understand from Mr. Demora, it would be better to leave it like retail establishments, because even other stores.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. I'll change it to that. Is a restaurant a retail establishment?
That's what I was going to ask.
Is it?
Well,
we can put both.
Or we could just leave it broad like we wanted to do before and just say to assist local businesses in expanding their business opportunities or something like that.
Outdoors. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're outdoor opportunities.
Okay. And then we have the second.
Okay. I'll second that.
Okay, great. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so the motion passes 4-0 to call a special meeting as soon as staff has had a chance to put together this idea of expanding restaurants and retail businesses, all small businesses, and as soon as there's been enough notice time.
Can I ask you, so what's the procedure? Can we invite the infamous Mr. Rick Crosby to be a part of that meeting since he's on the economic development, or no?
Mr. O'Rourke, I mean, certainly you can call on him to comment if you like, but I don't think
He's not a member of the...
Right, but he can't participate in the council discussion or vote.
Yes. Is it, Mr. Demore, is it legal? Is it within procedure to have a Philadelphia Phillies shirt on during council meetings, or can we just leave? Or can we just leave him just voice? Okay, someone from Pittsburgh doesn't really appreciate the Philadelphia Phillies shirt that much, but that's okay.
All right. Well, all kidding aside,
yes.
Our last item is to adjourn. And so we are adjourning this meeting. Have a great week, everybody, until our special council meeting.
Thank you.
Good job, ladies.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.